2017, last time I did this, right? Stop being a perfectionist. My motto was try and enjoy the journey, i.e., for sake, stop beating yourself up and have a go, right? Redefined as of breaking news last month. When I redid this coat of arms again, it is have a life worth living.
Right.
And that links to the living the values,
Yeah.
delivering the purpose,
Yeah.
and leaving my. There is a time when this body will fall apart, right, and it will be no more toast. Yeah. But without sounding like a complete knob, right? I want to leave my soul in the people that I've touched.
Welcome to episode 12 of the Untapped Potential podcast with today's guest, Ian Braid. Ian's vision as CEO of the British Athletes Commission led to the sector strengthening the support offered to vulnerable adults in sport. He also played a key role in the DCMS review of duty of care in sport, assisting Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. Ian has also brought together significant experience in sport and his passion for helping others under the umbrella of DOCIAsport, the company he founded in 2017. He brings a refreshing and independent view to all aspects of duty of care in sport, from the perspective of coaches, officials, athletes, administrators, and the sector itself. Ian delivers change through consultation and collaboration, leading and embodying his values of helping others, equality, inclusion, fairness, and honesty. And in this episode, Ian shares some of the highlights and lows of his career, including some personal challenges. But what is clear is the impact he's had on the sporting system and many individuals by bringing attention to some hugely important issues. And this is why I'm super excited to have this conversation. He is a view that I don't know, I don't understand, and I'm really excited to hear your opinion of this conversation, because this is one of the most courageous, authentic, and just open conversations that I've had so far on the Untapped Potential podcast. It's a man who speaks from true wisdom now. And to me, I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. So without delaying it any further, here's this great conversation with Ian Braid. Welcome to this episode. And Ian, thank you so much for being open to have this conversation. I'm as all the conversations, but this one as well, I'm so excited to have.
Well, listen, I think it's a privilege that I've been invited, but and I'm very much looking forward to your incisive questioning and seeing where the answers take us. Yeah, and if it's of any benefit to at least one person, then this will be a good piece of work for the next hour.
Definitely. And just for those listening, I met you for the first time a few years ago at Sussex University. You work out there sometimes, and then we went to a conference a couple of years ago at Twickenham, wasn't it? And then we just got become friends in recent times and done some work together in recent times. And so
yeah, you, Richard, are one of several people that I've met in my life where sometimes you think, I'm pleased to have this guy in my network. I'm not quite sure why yet, but I know if I stick with him, it'll become evident, and it has. And so yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll unpack that in the pod, right? But yeah, let's give it a go.
Definitely. So, just Ian, just for those listening, so aimed at practitioners, so from performance directors, kind of all the way down, all the backroom staff, everyone involved with sort of athlete facing, of course. Just to give you context, Ian, I don't understand Ian's world of where Ian has been within performance sport. And so maybe just to start with, I have given obviously the introduction at the beginning, but maybe just a very brief intro into your involvement, like your lens of sport. Where have you been working? The British Athletes Commission, for example. And
yeah, sure. I'm going to show my age here. This year is the 50th anniversary of me volunteering in sport. So back in the day, it all started when I turned up in a summer of whatever year that would have been, 74, when I turned up to do some painting and decorating pre-season in Fleetwood Rugby Union Club's clubhouse. But but we won't go through 50 years of it. But I think there's a combination here. There's a combination of sort of paid roles. There's a combination of volunteering roles, and there's a combination of me as an independent consultant working in the sector. So I was a trustee of Sports Aid for 10 years, huge privilege. And Sports Aid, for the benefit of those that don't know, is sort of like the gateway to the talent pathway in this country, working with over 40 NGBs, looking to identify the person who's the next Kelly Holmes or Adam Peaty or Alistair Brownlee or whatever. I was for 6 years the major events director of British Triathlon. For 3 years, I sat on the board of Sport Resolutions UK. The 2012 to 2017, I had the huge privilege of being the CEO of the British Athletes Commission, as was the British Elite Athletes Association, now called, going from 2012, when it was those members that made this country feel brilliant for a month in the London Games, through to 2017, and we'll talk through that, I'm sure. Part of that, and because of my relationship with Sports Aid, I knew Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. November 2015, fatally, I took a text message from the Baroness, "Can you speak?" Well, there's only two answers to that question. If the Baroness says, "Can you speak?" it's how loud and when. She'd said she'd been to see Tracy Crouch MP, the then Minister of Sport, wants me to do a review of duty care in sport. I've talked to my husband. She says he thinks I should do it. So I'm now ringing you. Because if you don't help me do it, I'm not doing it. No pressure then, Baroness. But it was hugely significant for the sustainability of the BAC. I got involved in that. So then latterly, sort of in DOCIAsport, in the world of performance sport, I've done a lot of consulting with UK coaching. I have devised the mental health strategy for the talent pathway on the Isle of Man, which matters to me because I have some Manx in my wiring. I've also helped them establish an athlete advisory board, of which paradoxically I am currently the chair and looking to get out sharpish because it's not a good look for the Isle of Man talent pathway. So how about that?
Great. And I think what you said just before we start recording, just again for the practitioners, and like practitioners are like jigsaw pieces. You're one of the people who puts kind of the corners in place of the jigsaw. You're starting to put the framework around the jigsaw, and that really kind of resonated with me. So that's why I'm kind of really want to start with that, like overlaying like where you fit in the sporting system and what kind of lens that you see in. And so you say, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, well, you see, I walked. This is about the BAC bit now, because that really sort of focused my understanding of funding and particularly of performance sport. So I walked into a system that was saying at the time, "Look at us, we're brilliant. We've won lots of medals," because that was pretty much the sole definition of success.
Yes.
So the system was saying that, but the BAC was an organisation that, when I started, was in special measures, which is just a painful place to be because it's forensic. And rightly so, the perception was public funding had been wasted. So why should we have faith in you? And you're in special measures to prove you can get out of it. So that was really difficult. I had to do that, which I did in 18 months. But as I say, the system was saying we're brilliant, we win lots of medals. But because the BAC was benign, it wasn't contributing to that voice.
So it was it was kind of, just as you say that, so the BAC was saying a different picture, like, yes, there's objective success, but what you were finding was that actually at what cost, basically?
No, hugely. And it was at a lot of cost financially.
Right.
But it was that I discovered,
right,
and perhaps if I give you a couple of examples, you'll understand this, right? One was that an athlete, a Paralympian, came to me, or his family came to me, as I was building the profile again of the BAC. Word got round that there was this bloke, Ian Braid, in town. And his family got in touch with me. The athlete couldn't, because he'd been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. And his was a story of abuse by coaches, coach and head coach. So in his performance bubble, he had got nowhere to go and he fell over. As a consequence of doing that work, I did some due diligence, and I discovered, because I was looking for advice myself about how to give best advice, support and guidance to this guy and his family. And I established that there was no framework to protect vulnerable adults or adults at risk. And I had a conversation with a senior leader of one of the sports councils, and she was insistent that there was something in place. And I said, I'm telling you, there's not. So there was, in the true sense of the word, some ignorance on her part. Anyway, eventually I was invited to a meeting with her, and she said, Ian, I owe you an apology. You're right, there isn't any framework, and I've given funding to set up funding to the Ancraft Trust to set this up. So there was no, if we're talking about inclusion and diversity in talent or sport and activity in general, it was going on with one hand tied behind the back. I discovered within the space of 6 months early in 2014 that 3 athletes in 3 different sports had attempted to take their own life. Now, I haven't had any great formal training in any of this, but clearly this was wrong. And what's going on? Systemically, there must be something wrong.
Right.
I discovered there wasn't any. There was a bespoke private medical insurance scheme for performance athletes, lottery-funded athletes, world class. I discovered that there wasn't any mental health provision in that. You do your ACL, we'll get you a new knee. Do your shoulder, we'll get you a new shoulder, but nothing for here. So I had to again challenge the system to say, how many more of these attempted suicides do you guys need before you're going to wise up to this?
What?
And then,
just to pause you on there. On one, so talking about suicide, I guess anecdotally, in the people I've spoken to, there are 2 practitioners have admitted that around certainly one attempted, and discussions around that. And I suppose what what you mentioned there about if an athlete has an ACL, then there's full support, scans from surgery, scans, all this kind of stuff, and they're going to get a knee replacement. What challenges did you face with regards to that, the mental side of it, the mental health? Like what? And my point in asking that is, there was a paper recently around the conceptualization of mental health in Premier League football academies. And so one of the standout things was the stigmatization about, 1, for asking help, and 2, just maybe taking a step back, the idea of mental health is in some areas still considered not really anything. No one said that, but that's my brief take on it, I suppose. Not considered. So what kind of barriers?
Listen, you think about a high performance sporting environment, and it's a bubble, right?
Right.
And it's the pursuit of excellence, and it's the pursuit of high performance.
Yeah.
And because of the success of lottery funding, we do have, and that's the value of Sports Aid and Dennis Howell's vision in 1976. We are going to be sustainably successful, brackets, medals, brackets, in high performance sport, which is why he set up the Sports Aid as the gatekeeper to a talent pathway, right? So you've got lots of people, hugely talented people, peak condition, high performance, pursuit of excellence. And you've just identified the stigma around mental health. There was, I can think of one example of of somebody who, a high performance athlete, one of the people that I helped in one of those big investigations post 2016. And I remember her saying to me, I'm encouraged to talk about how I am with my sports practitioners and so on and so forth. Well, one, I go in for an appointment with this person and they've got the stash on of the NGB.
Yeah, right.
Well, hang on a minute. Whose side are you on? Right? And then secondly, this is a high performance bubble. I could talk to you about the strength of my mental well-being, and you may well perceive that as a weakness. And I know that when this meeting's finished at 11 o'clock, my rival for the position of centre forward is the next one in. Right. So I'm buggered if I'm talking to you about my mental health.
Right.
Because you'll say to me, well, if you can't hack it, Ian,
yes.
bugger off, let's have the next one on the rank. Hussaini, you're in. Right?
Yeah.
It was not set up to do that. I had to set up a dedicated confidential helpline that bypassed the sports practitioners for the athletes.
Right.
Where they came to the BAC and I put them directly into, you forgive me, I moved on. It's not called the England Institute of Sport anymore, but
UK Sports Institute.
The UK Sports Institute. You are on the numbers. So I set up this confidential helpline that bypassed the sports system that was contributing to the poor mental health, so that these people had the trust and the faith to be able to say something.
Right.
There was, there's loads of people, loads of organisations, NGBs particularly, they would all say to you, we put athlete welfare at the centre of everything we do. And we've got this 32-page policy on our website, which covers this, right? Well, one, do I know where to find it? And two, do I have any belief in it when I do find it? Because my practical evidence is if you show some weakness, you get binned.
Yes. Yeah. And I completely agree. And I think one thing that stood out from what I remember you saying about the BAT, like all of a sudden kind of this voice for the athlete was there. What put you onto, or what put you onto all of a sudden realizing or focusing on the coaches, practitioners, the people behind the people, as DOCIAsport where you work now?
It's a good expression, that.
Yeah.
Looking after the people. I wish I'd have bloody copyrighted it, to be honest with you. Well, it became very evident to me, right, that the funding of the BAC was only granted at a certain level that meant that it was a very small, lean operation, to the extent Ian Braid was the man who was front of house, and I had some support behind me back of house. Right? But I became aware very much of the fact that when athletes came, athletes suddenly, particularly as my tenure, although I didn't know it at the time, was coming to an end, right? The visibility was high, right? Lots of athletes had sat on grievances ahead of Rio because they didn't want to either undermine their potential selection. They needed to sort of toe the line, and secondly, they didn't want to undermine their performance, right? If they did get picked. So people sat on their hands. But after Rio, as many of the listeners and there were then these substantial number of investigations into high performance sport.
Yes.
And that was because the athletes came to me. It was all athlete led. Now, one of the things that I think helped build the good side of some of my reputation was that a lot of people knew that I always believed that just because an athlete had a grievance didn't mean to say they were always right.
Right.
But at least the athletes had got somebody to come to.
Mm-hmm.
And it can get the allegations could be malicious because it's a non-selection thing, for instance. I've given 20 years of my life and you've not picked me, right? I'm coming for you, right? But I was able to work out ultimately what I thought was a genuine grievance and what wasn't. but the performance coaches didn't have it. They didn't understand that there was anybody that they could go and talk to either. So if you then get, a case and maybe a coach is suspended or pending investigation or whatever, then they too have a very lonely place, right? And which can affect their well-being and their mental health. And so when I set up DOCIAsport, I was very keen on, well, because of my own lived experience of eventually capitulating and having I was seriously mentally ill in 2017, though I didn't realize it until that time. I'd been ill for a while. And when I was in the period of talking to the board, the BAA, to negotiate my resignation because I couldn't sustain it anymore, not for me, not for my family, I was done. And I think I was done as the leader of the BAC as well.
Right.
But I talked to people, other CEOs, PDs, and I didn't hide behind, despite the fact men of a certain age from the north of England particularly aren't supposed to talk about mental illness. I did. And the response was amazing. Ian, I know 6 people like you. Ian, I'm on 8 pints a night. It's the only way I can cope. Ian, I'm on 250 milligrams a day of something.
Yeah, just to pause you on there as well, like just for anyone listening, and I thought it's really like you've just gone there automatically. I was going to ask you that. In your experience, looking back in hindsight, just for anyone that might not have any awareness of this, like what symptoms did you, in hindsight, can you look back now before you got to your breaking point? What type of things were you seeing in yourself, or just your personal experience?
I felt very isolated. And I felt very lonely. And I thought some of that was just because, A, I was a CEO, senior person, and that's lonely anyway. Secondly, I'm challenging a system that is still saying we're bloody successful because we win lots of medals. And so that is hard. I was working, I thought what I'm doing clearly isn't working. So what I then started to do was work even harder in a way that actually wasn't working. I was just rubbish, right? I'd stopped listening to music. I'd stopped reading. All those sort of distractions that take you away. Yeah. I was all quantity, not quality. If you're suffering from some severe clinical depression, if somebody was to say to you, well, somebody said to me, look, if you want to see somebody on an NHS, I'm afraid it's going to be 7 months' time.
Yeah, right.
And I said to them, I don't know where I'm going to be at 7 o'clock tonight. Those sort of mindsets were, in retrospect, were just scary.
Yeah.
So it was like, and that, very isolated, very lonely, very shut off. I'd shut down. I was an automaton. Didn't know who to turn to. And then when I was talking to people about it, when I was sort of signed off work, or when I came back, sorry, and they were telling me, I know 7 people. I thought, bloody hell, maybe you're not so isolated and not so lonely. Who's looking after the people? I thought to myself.
Right.
Because clearly I hadn't. I'd made a complete Orlix of it. I felt I'd let my family down. Priority. I felt I'd let 1,500 members of the BAC down. Second priority, because I thought at the time that was my purpose. And that gave me the incentive to set up DOCIAsport, and gave me what I then thought was another revived purpose. Because if you're scoring 20 out of 21 in a general anxiety disorder questionnaire, you're scoring 23 out of 27 in a personal health questionnaire, you are not in a great place. And if you lose a sense of purpose when you're feeling like that,
right,
you are very, very vulnerable to suicidal thoughts. Thankfully I didn't have them, but I was severely at risk. It wouldn't have taken much.
Just from where it got that point, and I suppose what helped you, you said there's nothing there for coaches. What helped you come back? kind of recover. And I know that's a long process, but kind of, again, for anyone listening that might be resonating with the things you're saying or knows people, what were, say, the first steps that you took? And if you can, not to reduce everything down, I don't mean to do that for this question, but like, yeah, kind of just some steps that you took from being that lost, lonely.
I smile because you've got a surprising answer, or your listeners have got a surprising answer here. The first thing was, which was not my choice, but the day before I went to the doctors to be signed off, was the day that a soft-coated Irish Wheaten Terrier, aged 12 weeks, turned up in Chateau Braid. And the house was joyous, chaotic, giddy. The first dog we'd ever had, because I'd always batted away the kids. Can we have a dog? No, you can have a cat. You can have a guinea pig. So Fred, although initially, he's looking at me as a 12-week-old dog going, please tell me the big man don't live here, because he looks miserable and he smells miserable. And I'm looking at Fred going, Fred, I've got chaos in my head here. Every time I go through the front door, I've got chaos. And the only place I have got stability in my life in this house is this house. And you've just turned up, crapping everywhere, ripping everything to shreds. It was the day I realised I've never felt so lonely in my life. And after a bike ride, I came back and I said to Diane, my wife, I'm going to the doctors. I think I'm ill. And I think I'm done at the BAC. And Fred helped me in that recovery.
Right.
I was signed off work for a month, so that get off the bloody roundabout was critical. Fred needed emptying twice a day. He got me outside, right? Being outside. These all sound cliched things, right? But when you think you're defined by your purpose, which is to improve high performance sport or whatever, you don't take that step back. So being outside, being with Fred, Fred teaches you. Fred teaches you your load, right? You're thinking in your head all the time, well, I've got this to do and that to do and the other to do. And the dog is going, oh, hang on a minute, there's a leaf. I've got to have a look at that. They're very much in the moment.
Yes, yeah.
He's taught me loads, that dog. One of the things I also did very quickly as well was I established what I talk to as or refer to as my personal board.
Yeah.
Get rid of that sense of isolation and loneliness, right? Yeah. So there are family members, friends, colleagues that I've worked with. Some know they sit on my personal board. Others haven't got a bloody clue, but they're all there, and they're like, Ian, I saw you on that presentation and you didn't look great, or I haven't heard from you a couple of weeks. You all right? Do you want to go for a beer?
Right.
Whatever, right? So